And now Vishy has the option to develop this bishop to e7 so that he can castle, but instead he decides to capture this knight on d4 by knight takes d4. But guys, instead of f3 in this position, it's better for white to slide this king to b1. And suppose if black pushed b4 trying to attack this knight, simply knight to a4. And if knight takes e4, queen takes b4, and in the next move, white will place this bishop to b6, which attacks this queen, and by this, white will be better. Okay, so in the actual game, after f3, here Vishy goes for queen to a5. And again, black is threatening to push b4, so that's why to stop this, here Ivanchuk pushed a3. And after that, here white goes for g4, starting a pawn march, and in the next move he will may definitely go for this move h4. But guys, here instead of g4, white can also consider this move, which is knight to d5, asking for queen exchange. But why we are doing this? I mean, what's the point? At first, it looks like black simply wants to exchange queens, but that's not the only reason. The main point is that white also wants to exchange the knights, because without knights, white can hardly expect to achieve anything against black slightly weakened queen side. So playing knight to d5 is an really admission that white can no longer hope to gain an advantage. The problem with Ivanchuk move is that he is soon forced to play knight to d5 anyway, and when that happens, the move g4 will not only fails to help white, but it also weakens this queen side. This is the statement which Anand gives after this game. Okay, so let's continue this game. Suppose if queens are traded over the board, now white can capture on f6 with a check, and now we have option to capture this either with the pawn or with the bishop. Here capturing with the pawn might be the better option because it also opens this g file where black can place his rook and gain fully control over it. Suppose after rook takes d2, f5. Okay, creating any pawn break, but simply takes bishop takes f5, and clearly you can see that now this game is close to equal. Okay, so in the actual game, after this move g4, here Vishy goes for rook to b8, preparing for this pawn push, but here black can, instead of playing rook to b8, he can directly go for this move b4. Now, if white decides to capture this pawn on b4, suppose if takes, simply queen takes b4, and in the next move, black will bring this rook to b8 so that he can target this b2 pawn. And if knight to d5, asking for this queen exchange, we will capture this knight first, and after takes, queen takes d2, rook takes d2, and finally bishop to d7. And at the end, you can see black gets this open file where he can place his rook in future. Although this game is still equal, but white has to be precise to save it. Okay, so in the actual game, after rook to b8, Okay, so here white captured on f6 with a check, but that's a mistake. Instead, he must consider this move, which is rook takes d2. And yeah, so let's suppose if bishop takes d5, then after e takes d5, and since this bishop is not doing too much on e7, so it's better for black to just bring this to this d8 square, so that he can bring this bishop to b6 when it becomes possible, securing an advantage with a good knight versus bad bishop after the exchange. However, white can go for rook to d1, and which opens the squares for this dark square bishop, and if bishop to b6, and you know that exchanging this bishop will activate the black rook, so that's why the best option for white will be to bring back this bishop to c1. And basically this is a stockfish line where white can manage his pawn structure balanced by this bishop pair. Okay, so suppose after rook takes d2, so that's why here capturing with the knight might be the good option. This is because after takes, simply takes attacking this bishop, and after bishop to d7, and now you can see that black will be slightly better due to these two active bishops. And in the next move, black can bring this bishop to g5 so that he can open this h file. And okay, so in the actual game, after this move, knight takes f6 check. So that's why here Anand captured with a pawn. A good move by Anand. As I told you that capturing with the bishop will not going to help or give any advantage to black. But by capturing with the g pawn, you can see that this g file is now opened and black can bring his rook to g8 at any time in the future. And it's better for white to take this, but instead Ivanchuk goes for this move, which is rook to g1. But some of you might be thinking of move which is bishop to e2, but this is losing for white. But why? This is because now black can push b4, threatening to capture on a3, and it's better for white to just push this. But suppose if he takes, now this after takes, white can capture this pawn also, and now black can bring his rook to h3, attacking this bishop. And if suppose bishop to a7, attacking this rook, simply rook takes b4, and clearly you can see that black is completely better in this position. Okay, so let me go back to this move, which is h5. Suppose some of you might be thinking of this move h3. Here, what will happen if he defends this pawn by his h pawn? But that will also be a mistake, because after takes, and bishop takes g4, and obviously this pawn is pinned, so you can't capture this. And yeah, by this white will be better. Okay, sorry, black will be better. Okay, so after this move, which is h5, so that's why he decides to go for rook to g1. And in this position now Anand finds a brilliant move, which is bishop to c4. Another positional decision by Anand. Basically he wants to exchange this good bishop for a white bad one. Now white can't stabilize his pawn with rook to g3 or by playing h3, so they main remains weak. Meanwhile, black will eventually make pawn breaks to activate the e7 bishop and dissolve this pawn, dissolve this he can dissolve this pawn weakness. And the move like bishop takes c4, c4 is not going to work, because after takes, if suppose rook to g3, now black can go for c3, attacking this rook as well as this important b7 pawn. And yeah, that's all. So that is why after seeing this all, after bishop to c4, here black decides to attack this bishop by playing b3. And after that, here Anand decides to play d5. Basically, he wants to make a pawn break so that he can establish two central pawns. But this is slightly premature due to the coming tactics, which we will see later. For now, rook to c8 might be the better option for black, and after that he can push this move, which is b4. By this, you can see a white pawn structure get shattered. But after that, here he simply takes on d5 with a check. A very good move by Anand, creating an immense pressure towards this e5 pawn. And here, black cannot play king to e6. This is because now white can sacrifice his bishop by bishop takes e5, which is also attacking this rook. And suppose if game continues like rook to c8, he tries to defend this rook, but now white can play this amazing move, bishop takes f6 check, sacrificing this rook. And after king takes f5, simply bishop takes e7. And in this, and you can see that now this position becomes completely equal, because black is left with two pawns, whereas white has these four pawns, which automatically makes this position equal. So that is why after seeing this all variation, after rook to f5, he decides to play king to c6. Okay, so yeah, so before that, let me tell you something. Okay, so after this move, rook to f5, here, suppose this king to c6. After this move, here, suppose if yeah, so basically this move, yeah, so let me go back. Yeah, after king to c6, here rook at e goes to f2 is played by Ivanchuk, but that's a mistake. Instead, he must consider this move, which is rook to f3. And now white is threatening to give a check from c3 square, and if black brings his rook to d8, so that he can give a check from d1 square, but that will be a huge mistake. Because of this move, which is rook to c3 check, king to d7, bishop takes e5, a discover check on this attack on this rook, and after rook takes c3, rook to d2 check, king to e6, and finally bishop takes c3. And yeah, that's all. So okay, so in the actual game, after rook at e goes to f2, okay, so basically now Vishy is guarding this f6 pawn. Here, black can continue this game by making a battery of this rook, but instead Anand brings his another rook to c7. And in this position, the final move by Anand is rook to d2, and in this position, Ivanchuk resigned. What an amazing endgame by Anand. Like this video and also make sure to subscribe to my channel. This is your host Bison signing off. Bye bye.